like to welcome Dr. Jack Sarfatti to the Stardrive Report. We're going to do a little research update and discuss a few other things. There was a recent podcast by Jim Breslow. What was it called again?
I think it's called Hidden Truth.
Hidden Truth, yeah, and that generated a great deal of publicity with a number of news stories out on various web publications discussing this. And
the Daily Star newspaper.
Daily Star, Express,
the Singapore Times,
IB International Business Times. It got a lot of play, and what I wanted to discuss with you today is you've been making a lot of strides in the research, and also we might want to talk about the European research effort that is currently about to be funded.
We hope it's about to be funded because of the coronavirus. We have this group in Italy. We have the group in Italy headed by Gaetano Battaglini, who is an attorney in Cortona, Tuscany in Italy, but he's also a physicist, and he has a lot of experience working with the European Union. In any case, he's put together a team to support my work, which includes a consortium of several Italian universities that run a advanced PhD granting institution also in Tuscany, not far from Cortona, a little mountain village there. And those people, they've agreed to become part of our team. And there's also a spin-off from the University of Milan, a Metamaterial research engineering firm, and they want to get in on it. We have people from the Italian military that are monitoring it, and at least one major NATO aerospace contractor. So things are looking good, but of course this was all before the coronavirus. We wanted to start having meetings at least in the fall of this year, 2020, but of course now we don't know if that's going to happen. But if it does happen, we can also do it virtually by Zoom or Skype, the way people are doing it. But of course I would like to get over to England and Italy. Also, we have things happening in England.
So I understand that you've made some real strides in the research. Can you just in as simple a fashion as you can explain what's going on as far as that?
The summary is on the whiteboard for those of you who are physicists and engineers. But basically, I have created a concept of a simple laboratory device that we can test to see if my basic idea is correct, that depending on how you configure the device, you can either generate a anti-gravity field or a gravity field with small amounts of power. And the device is basically very simple. It's shown on the board here. Basically what you have is a cylinder, just a cylinder of metamaterial. The problem is to design the metamaterial. Well, we may be able to do some crude experiments, even with coarse metamaterial, stuff that the people in Milan, at the Milan company, they could put together.
Isn't it basically, weren't you saying it basically resembles a capacitor or a metamaterial?
Yeah, okay, what it is, well, okay, you have a cylindrical rod, just like a rod in a nuclear reactor, right? Yeah, you have this cylindrical rod of this metamaterial stuff, and at the ends of the cylinder, you have two metallic plates. So it's like a parallel plate capacitor with a circular cross section, okay? And then you have a source of voltage, like an AC, an oscillating voltage generator, an AC generator voltage, and you also have wires that you coil wires from the generator around the cylinder, but in such a way that the wires end on the contacts on the conducting plates. So what it is, that's a little bit tricky to do that right, but what it is in simple elementary physics, like if you get a hold of the famous Richard Feynman lectures on physics, Volume 1, Chapter 23, there's all the math you need there. And what it is, it's called it's basically a series LRC oscillator circuit. L stands for inductor, a solenoid, inductance L, a capacitor C, and of course resistance, because there is some resistance in the flow of the current through the wire. And that. So the thing is now the theory is that when we play with this device and vary the frequencies and vary the strengths of the voltages, there should be some gravitational anomalies developing.
Okay. So this device is a large-scale kind of toy model, macroscopic-sized device.
Of what would happen. Now in the Tic Tac, in the warp drive, in the Tic Tac, what's happening is that you have things like this, but at a very tiny scale,
right.
Maybe a nanometer scale.
Right. And
there's a whole bunch of them. There's a whole... Yeah, they're like pixels on a TV screen.
Okay.
It just
so it just covers the entire skin of the vehicle.
What do you call it? Mail armor, the mail on the knights, but each little ring like is like one of these devices.
Right.
Okay, and of course they're all hooked up together in a network. It's like a network. So in any case, the idea is that if we could get certain resonances in the metamaterial, then that should demonstrate... there's another thing. Okay, this is really important. And this is... I only realized this pretty recently. The problem is, here's what happens. You have a dielectric, what's called a piece of material, metamaterial, or maybe even not metamaterial. And you apply electromagnetic fields to the material. What the electromagnetic field does, it displaces the charges in the material, and you have what's called... susceptibility responses. There are two kinds. There's like an electric susceptibility, it's also called permittivity, and there's a magnetic response called permeability. But in any case, you have these electromagnetic response fields. And the idea is that under certain conditions, these responses will get very big. That's called a resonance, a susceptibility resonance in the material. And that's what we're looking for. And but there's another thing, that these susceptibilities are what are called complex functions. They are what are called in mathematics a real and an imaginary part. The imaginary part is due to dissipation, like resistance, heat generation, stuff like that. And the idea is that whenever you measure things in the real world, at least classically speaking, it's thought that everything has to be a real number, not a complex number. So the thing is, what is the role of this imaginary part in the susceptibility? And then, it's just being stupid. I looked at Feynman, and there it is. What it does is that what the susceptibility is doing in terms of the gravitational anomaly that we want to generate, it's causing a phase shift. It's causing just a difference in time in between the applied voltage and the induced gravitational field. You see, so it turns out that you need this dissipation, you need heat generation in order to generate the warp field. And I should say this. What I'm showing here is, see, how does this work? Einstein's general relativity provides a connection between applying an electromagnetic field in a material and the gravitational field that the electromagnetic field will induce. That's in Einstein's equations. Okay, and all I've done is to take Einstein's equations, and I make sure I haven't broken what are called any symmetry requirements. All the invariance properties are satisfied, even inside the material. This is something which a lot of physicists don't understand how to properly do, because they never consider Einstein's equations inside material. They only do it like outside. They only do it outside of material, in the vacuum outside of material. So they've missed this thing. Okay.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I know exactly why it is. It's because the people in general relativity are generally mathematicians who want to be physicists. Okay? And the real physicists, like guys who, get their hands dirty in the laboratory, they don't, they're a little bit shy of mathematics. So it's just like a difference in cultures. So, and the point is, you can be a very good general relativists and be able to compute all kinds of things from Einstein's equations in vacuum, or even if there's a material that's outside the vacuum. But and the other thing is that even if you do things in the standard manner inside the material, I won't go into there's a certain detail, but it's too hard to explain. It has to do with what the velocity of light is inside the material. Most materials, the velocity of light inside the material is not that different from the velocity of light in vacuum. A little bit different, maybe 10% different, even maybe twice, even 10 times, but it won't make a big difference in what you see. With these metamaterials, we're looking for a really big difference in the speed of light inside the material, where it gets very low. Okay, the effective speed of light in this metamaterial resonance gets very small. Okay, and under those conditions, you can induce a very large gravitational field from a very small amount of electromagnetic energy. See, that's what this device will test if we could find the right metamaterial design. But that's the big thing. Let me make an analogy with nuclear physics. Okay, with the bomb, Manhattan Project. My professors at Cornell, who I learned physics from, like Hans Bethe, Phil Morrison, they're the ones who designed the atomic bomb. With Oppenheimer, they were part of Oppenheimer's team in World War II. But in any case, what happened was in the 1930s, John Wheeler and Niels Bohr sort of saw the possibility of nuclear fission, of the basic idea of a fission bomb. And Lisa Meitner, who's a Jewish woman, German physicist in Germany, this is 1930s, the Nazis were coming into power, she did experiments showing that the effect was there. So the war started. Leo Szilard wrote Franklin Delano Roosevelt saying, listen, we got to develop this because Heisenberg may be trying to do it for Hitler and all that kind of thing. Okay, so the big problem was that they understood the basic physics, the concept of how to make a bomb, but they had to refine the uranium, get plutonium, a certain isotope. That was the big project was getting the material right, getting the right isotopes of uranium and plutonium, refining them and making them. That was the big problem. That was the Oak Ridge. That was down in Tennessee, with John Wheeler helping to direct that. And that's what took most of the money, actually. Okay, so I'm making an analogy. Getting the right material is analogous to finding the right isotope of uranium and plutonium.
So the theoretical basis was already there and pretty much agreed upon by everyone.
Yeah, the theoretical basis for the fission bomb could be understood by not only a high school student, by a bright 11, 12-year-old in middle school. Okay, the idea, same here. I could teach this to a kid, a bright 12-year-old, look at the idea. But engineering the metamaterial, finding that, and then there's a lot of work being done on that. There are all kinds of supercomputer algorithms and programs where you specify what you want the metamaterial to do to electromagnetic fields, and it'll tell you how to make the metamaterial.
Right.
Okay. But the problem there is, there's another problem there.
They're using supercomputers to design metamaterials in advance now.
You need really good computers. You need powerful computers and very smart programmers to do it properly. The problem is that most of the work being done in metamaterials has to do with electromagnetic waves, what are called far fields, propagating through the material. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in what are called near fields, induction fields, or Tesla, Nikola Tesla. These are the near fields. They don't move through the material. They're kind of stationary inside the material. Just like, the Earth's gravitational field is what's called a nearly static, quasi-static, near gravitational field. It's not gravitational waves. It's not like gravitational waves coming from the colliding, merging black holes. You see that Kip Thorne, you see pictures.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. That's gravitational waves.
There's nothing propagating. It's just here. It's inherent.
It's confined. They're called evanescent waves. They're confined waves. They're not. The gravitational field of the Earth is, the acceleration of gravity doesn't change. It's static. It's pretty much the same. It changes with height, with distance, but it's what's called a static field. And that's what we want to do here. We have to generate static near fields, not waves. Well, we could generate gravitational waves. We could do that, but we don't want to do that. Generating gravitational waves is like oil leaking from your engine. You don't want to do that. It's taking energy away from what you want to do. In order for the Tic Tac to basically in a sense, cancel out the Earth's gravitational field, it's got to create a near field, not gravitational waves. Gravitational waves won't do anything. So there's this distinction. So the point is that most of the research is being done with what are called far field optics. It's not, they're not, it's a little bit of work being done on near fields. In fact, there's one of our team guys named Keith Wanzer, who's a full professor of physics at Cal State Fullerton, has actually studied the near fields inside metamaterials, but it's not a major focus in mainstream research, and that's one of the things we're going to have to do. So that's our big problem. But once we have good metamaterial design, and we can just make a cylinder of it, like in a nuclear reactor, so a rod, metamaterial, cap on some metal plates, stick in the wires and wrap some coils around it with an AC generator, and see what happens, and see if we generate, some weird gravitational anomalies. That's what we have to do. That's it. You want to talk about?
Yeah, the latest episode of Hunt for the Skinwalker had an interesting result last night, where the team went out into a field, and for the audience, they measured some anomalously high electromagnetic radiation, microwave radiation, at about 1,000 feet above the ranch, and which is counterintuitive because, as one of the physicists said in the show, it should get weaker as it gets higher rather than stronger. So something up there.
That was Tyler, I guess.
Yeah, no, the other guy, the other PhD,
yeah.
Forgot his name, but it's opposite of what it should be. So they were out in the field, and they had a bunch of cattle out in the field. And the cattle acted very strangely as they were preparing to launch the rocket. They all were really agitated and clustering together and huddling together at the very far end of the field. And they launched a rocket, and the parachute failed, and some of the equipment got slightly damaged. So they prepared another rocket, and as they were preparing to launch the second rocket, they saw a UFO, and you could see it clearly in the video from the show.
What did it look like?
It looked like a silver ball. Very bright, silvery white ball in the sky.
In the sky.
Stationary, and then it appeared for a few seconds, and then it just faded out of view, just disappeared. It didn't, not as though it was moving, it just sort of just vanished.
Yeah.
And you could see that clearly in the video. So they launched the second rocket. In the second rocket, they had a device to measure gamma rays. And so, by the way, they did see the UFO again afterwards. They saw it twice. And they also had it on the fixed observation cameras that they had installed on the ranch. So, to make a long story short, they went back and they looked at the data of the gamma ray data, and it was pretty much normal right up until the point until they did the launch. And all this weird stuff started happening with the UFO in the sky, and the cows reacting.
What happened with the cows?
Yeah, well, the cows were just all huddling together, and they were freaked out. All this happened within seconds or minutes.
So there's a herd of cows in the field.
In the field, and they all ran together. And then the UFO appeared, and then they launched the rocket. So when the rocket was in the air, the gamma ray readings were way up, anomalously high as it was going up, like they had observed with the triangulation stuff they did earlier. So what did you speculated that it might have been some kind of a portal?
Okay, this is, I think I know what it is, based on the same physics I'm doing here. A couple weeks ago I was reading through the literature, and I found a paper by Matt Visser, who's kind of the expert in wormholes and stargates and black holes and all that. And it's a metric field, a gravitational warp field for a portal, for a Stargate portal. And then I realized I was also working on just playing around with the Alcubierre warp drive toy model. It's not realistic enough for the real Tic Tac, but as what a physicist does, you look at a simple little toy model and try to get the essence of it, okay? And I realized I could combine Alcubierre's Tic Tac type warp drive model for like a starship with the traversable Stargate wormhole model of Visser, and put them in one description, one metric field, which has a dual function. It can either operate like a spaceship, like a starship, it can move, or it can just hover there as a portal to something else where, like the creatures, okay, in the Jacques Vallée, Eric Davis high strangeness paper made about Skinwalker Ranch when Robert Bigelow owned it years ago before he sold it to Brandon Fugal. They report Bigfoot-type creatures coming out of a hovering portal. So what it looks as though that there is this portal that's stationary, hovering over
Right.
this particular spot at Skinwalker Ranch, causing all the anomalies.
Right.
It's coming from about 1,000 feet.
Right.
Okay, so that's what I think it is. But the point is, you see, everything now is easy to understand because it doesn't take a lot of energies. I've solved the energy problem. Okay, that's the big. See, it used to be that all the king's men, they thought, oh, these solutions are very nice. Have starships go to the, go to explore the universe like in Star Trek. But unfortunately, we're trapped here. We'll never do it. It takes too much energy. It takes a Jupiter-sized mass of energy. At the very least, we can't do it. We're stuck here. Oh. What a bunch of schmucks. But that's not the case. Pardon my French. But it takes that. It turns out, theoretically, it was all in Einstein's equation. One other thing I should say. The reason all the pundits didn't see what I have seen is because what they do, when they look at Einstein's equations show, given a certain amount of energy, how much gravitational field does it generate. But they assume, they set the coupling constant equal to 1. Because I'm only interested in the math and the mathematical form, not interested in the actual magnitudes, the numbers for most of their applications. They set equal to 1. And they forgot that there is the speed of light in that coupling between matter and gravity. There's the speed of light. And they forgot Maxwell. Maxwell, during the American Civil War in Scotland, he did the first unified field theory where he unified light, electricity, and magnetism, and he showed how the speed of light depends upon the electric and the magnetic properties of the medium. Now, in the case of vacuum, the vacuum has electromagnetic properties, which we know from what's called quantum electrodynamics, but so does material. And they forgot how the material, how the electromagnetic properties of the material will change the coupling between matter and gravity inside a material. They just forgot about that. They just acted like it wasn't there. And I showed once you include Maxwell's electrodynamics correctly in Einstein's gravitational fields equations, once you do it right and with a metamaterial that can have these giant resonances, then you can generate a strong gravitational field with very tiny amounts of energy. Okay? And the thing is, well, why even do that? Because the Tic Tac, the close encounters of the Tic Tac and the gimbal, whatever they call it, different things they call it, slightly different observations, that the only way those vehicles could do what they're doing is through this kind of warp drive. And the reason that people like Eric Davis rejected it as being warp drive was because it would take too much energy, burn up the atmosphere. But I've shown why that is not the case. See?
Well, obviously it's not the case because we're seeing them do that, and it's not destroying everything within 1,000 miles.
So we're basing. So everything I'm saying is what's called proper falsifiable. We can test it. It can be wrong, and it's the only explanation that accounts for the facts. And I must say it because I do get pissed off at some of my colleagues who say, "Oh, you can't assume it's your theory. You can't assume you're right. There may be other theories that can explain it also." And then when I ask them, "Do you have another theory that can explain it also?" No, they don't know. They scratch their head like monkeys before the monolith in Space Odyssey. A bunch of schmendricks, I'll tell you, and that's it. Stop it.
So that's great, Jack. I mean, it's looking good. I must say. I mean, you seem to be.
They're looking very good.
I mean, the formalism I can see by the work you've been showing me. You're making great strides with that. We can't get into that
It's
here.
elementary physics. This is the kind of physics that Richard Feynman would talk about at Caltech in the 1960s to his undergraduates, to his freshman, sophomore, and junior undergrad. This is junior, sophomore, undergraduate physics for smart kids like at a place like Caltech, at least in the 60s, now the universities are totally dumbed down. God knows what they're like. They can't even know what bathroom to use now, right? This LGBT, I mean, all this nonsense, all this, brainwashing, it's dumbing down. I would never give a dime to Cornell University where I went. I would never give a dime to the University of California because they've totally deteriorated and, they're turning out morons.
Well, obviously, we need to get to the next level here, which is assembling this team.
Well, we got the team. No, we have.
But I'm just saying.
We have the team up. I will also say this. I'm not going to mention names, but I was contacted by a young man in his 30s, connected with the U.S. Army intelligence, who has very high level connections in the Pentagon, and he is presenting what we're doing to very high levels of the U.S. military as we speak. And so we'll see.
Yeah. All right. I think we pretty much covered it, Jack. Let's pick it up at a later date.